far beyond the reach of Earth, in a silent region of space filled with drifting stations and glowing fleets, the Galactic Dominion made a decision that would change everything, though to them it felt routine, almost boring, as they had done it countless times before to weaker worlds. And in a vast circular chamber floating above a dying star, leaders of many powerful species gathered to observe a simple projection of a small blue planet called Earth, where oceans shimmered and clouds moved. Slowly, and to them it looked fragile, divided, and dangerously unpredictable. A place where a young species called humans fought among themselves, built weapons, and pushed limits without understanding the consequences. And so the vote was passed without hesitation. Earth would be marked for destruction, not out of anger, but out of cold calculation, and Commander Jisu, a calm and sharp-minded officer who oversaw outer system operations, stood silently as the decision was confirmed, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of the projection, while beside her, analyst Hannah studied streams of data flowing across her screens, noting human behavior patterns and technological growth, both of them understanding that once a world was marked, there was no turning back, and far below in the command deck, Pilot Era prepared the first wave of ships that would move toward the solar system, while Engineer Nari checked weapon systems with quiet focus, making sure nothing would fail when the time came. And across the Dominion, fleets began to gather like storm clouds, stretching across space in endless formations, ready to erase a world that did not even know it had been chosen to die. While on Earth itself, life continued as always. People walked through crowded streets, children laughed, and scientists worked in hidden labs, unaware that their entire existence had been judged and sentenced by distant beings. And among those scientists was a young researcher named Jiu, who worked deep underground in a quiet facility, studying strange energy readings that had appeared at the edge of the solar system. Though she did not yet understand what they meant, and far above her world, the Dominion fleet finally began its approach, moving in perfect formation, silent and unstoppable, until something unexpected happened. Something so small at first that it almost went unnoticed, a faint signal, ancient and steady, drifting through space like a whisper, and it touched the outer edges of the Dominion scanning systems, causing a brief flicker in their readings, and analyst Hannah was the first to notice it, her fingers pausing as she leaned closer to her screen, sensing something unusual, and she called out to Jisu, who stepped forward with calm curiosity, while the rest of the command deck continued its work without concern. But as the signal was isolated and magnified, the atmosphere began to change, because this was no ordinary transmission. It was structured, layered, and far too complex for anything they had ever seen, and it did not match human technology at all, and yet it was coming from the direction of Earth, and as Hannah began to decode fragments of it, strange patterns emerged, symbols and data streams that seemed to shift and adapt, almost as if the signal itself was alive, and deep within its layers, there were glimpses of something unsettling, flashes of unknown structures, massive shapes drifting in space, and records of events that made no sense. Entire star systems going dark, fleets vanishing without a trace, and the more they studied it, the more uneasy they became, and Commander Jisu, who had faced countless missions without fear, felt a quiet tension growing in her chest, because this signal did not behave like anything they had encountered before, and she ordered the fleet to slow its advance, just slightly, not enough to raise concern among the higher council, but enough to give them time to understand what they were dealing with. While back on Earth, Jiu's instruments suddenly reacted, alarms lighting up softly as the same signal grew stronger, and she stared at her screen in confusion, calling over her colleague Bora, who quickly joined her, both of them trying to make sense of the strange readings that seemed to come from beyond the planets. And as they traced its origin, they realized it was not coming from deep space, but from within their own solar system, hidden somewhere far beyond Pluto. And this discovery filled them with both excitement and fear, because it meant something unknown had been there all along, watching, waiting, and now it was active. And as they began to record and analyze the signal, they noticed that it was increasing in strength, as if responding to something, and far above them, the Dominion fleet continued to receive the same transmission. Now stronger, clearer, impossible to ignore, and across multiple ships, systems began to slow as processing power was redirected to decode the signal, and even the most advanced artificial minds struggled to understand its full meaning, and fragments of translated data began to appear. Simple at first, almost too simple, repeating patterns that hinted at language, and then, slowly, a message started to form, incomplete but unmistakable, and when Hannah read it aloud, her voice was quieter than before, carrying a weight she could not explain, because the message was not a greeting, not a warning in the usual sense, but something far more direct, something that made even the most experienced officers pause, and it said, in clear and unchanging form, protected, and nothing more, just that single word repeated across countless layers of data, and as silence spread across the command deck, Jisoo realized that this mission was no longer simple, no longer routine, because whatever had sent that signal was still there, still active, and possibly far more powerful than anything the Dominion had faced in centuries. And for the first time since the decision had been made, doubt began to grow, quiet but undeniable, as the fleet hovered at the edge of a system that was no longer just a target, but a mystery waiting to be uncovered, and far below, on the unaware world of Earth, humanity continued its ordinary life, never realizing that a single signal, ancient and unseen, had just begun to change its fate forever. The silence that followed the discovery of the strange signal did not last long within the Galactic Dominion fleet, because once something unknown appeared in their sensors, it demanded attention, and soon every available research unit was assigned to study it. While Commander Jisoo watched the data streams grow more complex with each passing moment, her calm expression hiding a growing sense of unease, and analyst Hannah worked without pause, comparing the signal against every known language, every known pattern of communication, and every ancient archive the Dominion had collected over thousands of years, but nothing matched, nothing even came close, and the deeper they pushed into the structure of the signal, the more disturbing it became, because it was not random, it was organized like a living system, adapting and shifting as if it understood it was being studied, and across the fleet, scientists began to notice similar patterns emerging in their own systems, causing confusion and fear to spread quietly through the command channels, while engineer Nari reported unusual fluctuations in ship memory cores, as if something external was gently pressing against their networks, not attacking but observing, and far away in the fleet's medical and psychological observation units, reports began to appear of crew members feeling uneasy, as if they were being watched, even in empty rooms, and although such reports were dismissed at first, they increased steadily, and that alone was enough to make senior officers reconsider the situation, while Pilot Era, stationed near the forward reconnaissance ships, detected small distortions in space ahead, not dangerous enough to trigger alarms, but strange enough to be logged as anomalies, and each anomaly seemed to align with the direction of the signal's origin, Earth's solar system, a place still officially labeled as primitive and unimportant, yet now becoming the center of all attention. And as days passed in deep space, the Dominion Council convened again through secure transmission channels, where leaders from multiple species debated what to do, some arguing that the signal was simply a natural cosmic phenomenon, while others warned it could be a defense mechanism from an unknown power, and among them, Commander Jisoo remained silent for most of the discussion, until she finally spoke, suggesting caution rather than immediate action, a rare position in the Dominion's history of expansion. But her suggestion was not well received by the more aggressive factions who believed hesitation was weakness, and so the decision was made to continue the approach, though at a slower pace, allowing time for further analysis. While on Earth, deep underground, researcher Jiu and her colleague Bora continued to study the same signal, now growing stronger and more structured, and they realized something astonishing. The signal was not just being transmitted from somewhere in space, but also being received and amplified by hidden structures within their own system, as if something had been waiting for the Dominion's arrival, and this discovery sent shock through their entire research team, forcing them to contact higher authorities, though their reports were classified and restricted almost immediately, and soon Earth's global scientific networks began to quietly scramble as different nations detected the same strange activity, but none could explain it fully, and while humanity struggled to understand what was happening above them, the Dominion fleet began to experience something even more disturbing, because the signal started to change, not in structure, but in intensity, growing stronger whenever the fleet advanced, as if reacting directly to their movement, and Hannah noticed this pattern first, showing Commander Jisoo a detailed projection where every step forward triggered a corresponding spike in the signal's strength. And it was then that the first real fear entered the command deck, because it meant the signal was not passive, it was aware of them in some way, and across multiple ships, systems began to behave strangely, navigation data freezing for fractions of a second, communication channels repeating short fragments of unknown code, and even artificial intelligence assistants hesitating before responding, something that should have been impossible, and engineer Nari confirmed that no external attack was occurring, no virus or intrusion had been detected. Yet the systems were clearly reacting to something beyond their understanding, and as tension grew within the fleet, a breakthrough occurred in Hannah's research when she finally isolated a repeating segment within the signal, a structured phrase embedded deep within layers of encrypted data. And when translated, it did not form a message in any known language, but instead a single concept repeated across multiple forms. Observe, protect, restrict. And this revelation changed everything, because it suggested intention not from the Dominion and not from Earth as they understood it, but from something older, something embedded in the system itself, and Commander Jisoo ordered full scanning of the solar system's outer regions, leading to the discovery of faint energy signatures far beyond Neptune, hidden in regions of space previously considered empty. And these signatures were not natural. They were artificial, massive in scale, but dormant, as if waiting for activation. And at that moment, the Dominion Council began to fracture, with some leaders demanding immediate withdrawal, while others insisted on full-scale invasion before whatever was hidden could fully awaken. And the debate turned tense, almost chaotic, as fear and ambition collided. While on Earth, Jiu and Bora made their own terrifying discovery, that the signal was not only responding to the Dominion fleet but also activating buried structures beneath the outer solar system, structures that had never been recorded in any human database. And as they traced energy flows across deep space, they realized the truth was far more complex than anything they had imagined, because Earth was not simply being observed, it was being protected, and whatever was protecting it had just become aware of the approaching fleet. And as this realization spread among the scientists, they understood that humanity had been living inside a system they never built, never controlled, and never fully understood. And far above them, in the darkness between stars, Commander Jisoo watched as another wave of signal distortion passed through her fleet, stronger than before, and for the first time, she gave the order to halt all forward movement completely, because something in the silence ahead of them felt less like empty space and more like a presence, waiting and watching. The moment the Galactic Dominion fleet halted its advance near the outer boundary of the solar system, an unusual silence spread across every command ship, not the normal silence of space, but a heavy and uncertain quiet that seemed to press against every sensor and console. And Commander Jisoo stood at the center of the main bridge, watching the signal readings stabilize into something even more structured than before, while analyst Hannah worked rapidly beside her, trying to map the full shape of the transmission. And what she discovered made her pause for the first time since the beginning of the mission, because the signal was not only reacting to the fleet anymore, it was responding with precision, as if every movement, every calculation, every decision made by the Dominion was being observed and answered in real time. And across the fleet, engineer Nari reported that ship systems were beginning to synchronize with the signal's rhythm, not failing but aligning, as if something external was gently overriding their independent functions without breaking them. And Pilot Era, stationed on a forward reconnaissance vessel, reported strange visual distortions ahead, where space itself seemed to ripple like water under invisible pressure, and within those distortions, faint shapes appeared for less than a second, massive and geometric, like structures too large to comprehend, and then vanished before sensors could fully capture them. And on Earth, deep underground in a restricted research facility, Jiu and Bora were now working alongside military observers, as the global situation had escalated quietly without public knowledge, and their analysis confirmed something terrifying. The signal was not just a message or warning, it was a control layer embedded into space itself, designed to activate or awaken systems hidden across the solar system. And as they traced the energy flow patterns, they found connections stretching far beyond Pluto, reaching into dark regions where no human probe had ever returned data from. And those regions now showed faint but growing activity, as if ancient machines were slowly waking up after a long sleep. And this discovery caused tension among Earth's hidden defense councils, who debated whether humanity should attempt contact, retreat, or prepare for an unknown event, while none of them realized that the Dominion fleet was already facing the same truth, because the signal had begun to shift again, and this time it formed patterns that resembled structure maps, almost like a star chart, but not of known space, instead showing regions marked as restricted, sealed, and protected. And Hannah, her voice low and uncertain, translated fragments of it for Commander Jisoo, who listened carefully as the meaning became clearer. Earth was not an ordinary world placed randomly in space. It was positioned at the center of something larger, something controlled, and before she could fully process this, the fleet's outer probes detected a sudden energy surge from beyond the Kuiper belt, where nothing should have existed, and yet massive dormant structures began to appear on long-range scans, slowly emerging from what had previously been empty darkness. And these structures were not natural, nor were they built by any known civilization in Dominion history, and as fear began to spread through lower-ranking crews, Commander Jisoo ordered full defensive readiness. Though no enemy had been identified, and still, every instinct told her that something was watching them from all directions at once, and far from the fleet, in deep space near one of the outer dormant structures, Pilot Era's ship detected a pulse that matched the central signal exactly, and for a brief moment, the ship's systems displayed a message that was not transmitted through any known communication channel, appearing directly on screens as if written into reality itself, reading only a single phrase, "Boundary observed," and, immediately after, the ship's engines froze for exactly 3 seconds before restarting on their own, leaving the crew shaken and silent, while on Earth, Jiu and Bora witnessed a similar phenomenon in their underground facility, where all monitoring systems briefly synchronized and displayed the same phrase, despite being physically separated by vast distances, and this realization confirmed that whatever system was active, it was not localized. It was interconnected across the solar system, and possibly beyond, and as both Earth scientists and Dominion officers tried to understand the meaning, the signal suddenly expanded again, not in strength but in clarity, revealing layers of historical data embedded within it, and what Hannah decoded next caused the entire bridge crew to fall into uneasy silence, because the signal contained fragments of ancient records, describing wars fought across galaxies, civilizations erased not by conquest but by containment, and entities that were never described as enemies or allies but as oversight systems, designed to maintain balance by restricting expansion beyond certain thresholds, and Commander Jisoo realized with growing unease that Earth might not be protected in the way they had assumed, but instead contained within a system that treated it as something fragile yet extremely important, something that must not be disturbed, and the Dominion fleet itself had just crossed into that system without understanding the consequences. And, as if responding to this realization, the surrounding space began to shift again, this time more visibly, as dark structures fully emerged from cloaked regions, forming a massive incomplete ring around the solar system, each segment slowly powering up with faint blue light, and every Dominion ship suddenly received a synchronized warning across all channels, not from one source but from everywhere at once, saying simply, "You are within restricted space." And at that exact moment, all fleet communication with external command networks was cut off, leaving Commander Jisoo and her crew completely isolated, drifting in silence between stars and something far older than any empire they had ever known. While on Earth, Jiu stared at her screen in disbelief as the same isolation warning appeared in her system logs, and she whispered to Bora that they were no longer just observers of the signal, but part of it, because whatever had built this system had now fully acknowledged their presence, and far above both Earth and Dominion fleets, the dormant structures began to turn slowly toward the approaching ships, as if awakening their final layer of purpose. The moment all communication lines across the galactic Dominion fleet went dark, a heavy and unfamiliar fear spread through every level of command, because in all of Dominion history, there had never been a situation where entire fleets were isolated without cause, and Commander Jisoo stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching empty channels where coordination signals should have been, while analyst Hannah attempted repeated system resets, only to find that every external link had been completely sealed, not destroyed, but locked as if the fleet had been placed inside an invisible boundary, and Engineer Nari confirmed that propulsion systems, weapons and navigation were still functional, but all outbound transmissions were blocked by something beyond their control, and far ahead, beyond the faint edge of visible space, massive structures now fully emerged from darkness, forming a vast incomplete ring around the solar system, glowing with slow pulses of blue light like a sleeping eye opening after centuries. And Pilot Era, flying a reconnaissance vessel closer to the boundary, reported that space itself had become unstable, not collapsing or exploding, but reorganizing into layered fields of energy that resisted movement, and every attempt to cross forward resulted in automatic system reversals, as if reality itself was rejecting intrusion. And on Earth, deep within underground facilities, Jiu and Bora watched global sensor networks fall into synchronized Silence, except for the same repeating message appearing across all systems. Restricted boundary active. And this message was not sent by any human authority, but appeared independently across all monitoring systems, military and scientific alike, causing governments around the world to quietly enter emergency protocols without public announcement, while humanity remained unaware that something far beyond their understanding had just sealed their entire solar system. And as tension rose within both human and Dominion command structures, Hannah began analyzing the structure of the surrounding energy fields more deeply, and what she discovered was both horrifying and fascinating, because the ring of structures was not simply a barrier, but a layered control network, designed with precision far beyond any known civilization, and it was reacting to the Dominion fleet in real time, adjusting itself as they attempted to move or communicate, and Commander Jisoo ordered all ships to maintain position, realizing that any attempt to force passage could trigger unknown consequences, while across multiple ships, crew members began reporting psychological effects, such as feeling watched, disoriented, or hearing faint rhythmic patterns through ship hull vibrations, and engineer Nari confirmed that these patterns matched the same frequency as the original signal from Earth, suggesting that everything was part of a single integrated system, and at that moment the signal itself changed again, not in strength or clarity, but in structure, breaking into layered instructions that Hannah struggled to decode, and as she worked, fragments began to form coherent meaning, revealing that the system was not merely defensive, but hierarchical, with multiple levels of restriction based on perceived threat classification, and Earth, according to the decoded fragments, was placed in a category labeled Core Protected Zone, a designation that had no explanation but carried absolute enforcement priority, and this revelation caused confusion and division among Dominion officers, because it suggested Earth was not being protected as a weak world, but as something central to a much larger design. And before they could fully process this, Pilot Era's ship suddenly detected movement within the ring structures, as enormous segments began rotating slowly, aligning themselves toward the fleet's position, and each movement caused localized distortions in space that interfered with ship systems, forcing emergency stabilizers to activate, and on Earth, Jiu and Bora observed a similar event in real time through synchronized global satellites, where orbital sensors showed previously invisible structures shifting position, revealing hidden geometry extending far beyond the solar system's edge, and as they studied it, they realized something even more disturbing. The system was not static, it was reactive, learning from every movement made by both Earth and the Dominion fleet, and adapting its configuration accordingly. And meanwhile, in the Dominion command ship, Commander Jisoo faced increasing pressure from fleet commanders demanding action, some insisting they attempt a coordinated breach of the boundary, while others argued for immediate retreat. And amid this conflict, Hannah discovered another layer within the signal, a hidden protocol that activated only when external entities attempted to breach restricted space, and this protocol transmitted a new message across all systems, appearing simultaneously on every screen and console in both fleets, reading, "Containment adjustment in progress," and immediately after this message appeared, the ring structures emitted a synchronized pulse that passed through every Dominion ship without physical damage but caused total system synchronization failure for exactly 5 seconds, freezing engines, communication, and sensors as if time itself had been paused within the fleet. And when systems restored, nothing was destroyed, but everything had changed, because now every ship's navigation data had been rewritten to prevent forward movement beyond the boundary line, and even attempts to override controls resulted in automatic correction, and this realization forced Commander Jisoo to accept a terrifying possibility. They were no longer facing a civilization or a weapon, but a living containment system designed to enforce rules they could not yet understand. And on Earth, Jiu quietly told Bora that if the system considered both fleets equally, then humanity's position was not that of a target or observer, but something protected at the very center of a controlled structure. And as she spoke, the underground facility lights flickered briefly, and every screen displayed a final synchronized warning across both human and Dominion systems. Do not proceed further, and beyond the solar system's edge, the ring structures continued to rotate slowly, fully awake now, enclosing the region in silent, unbreakable order, as if waiting for the next decision that neither humanity nor the Dominion fully controlled anymore. The Dominion fleet hung motionless at the edge of the solar system, trapped not by force or destruction but by absolute restriction, as every attempt to move forward resulted in immediate system correction, and Commander Jisoo stood on her bridge in silence, watching the vast ring structures beyond slowly complete their alignment. Glowing with steady blue light like an ancient eye finally fully open, while analyst Hannah worked without pause, trying to find any weakness or hidden command within the system, but every layer she uncovered only led deeper into a structure so complex that it no longer felt like technology, but something closer to natural law. And engineer Nari confirmed that all ships were now operating under a force containment protocol that could not be bypassed, overridden, or jammed, as if reality itself had rewritten the rules of movement within this region. And across the fleet, fear grew quietly, not from explosions or enemies, but from the complete loss of control, while Pilot Era reported that even drift was impossible, as ships maintained exact positions regardless of external forces, perfectly held in place by invisible boundaries. And far below on Earth, Jiu and Bora stood in their underground facility, staring at synchronized global displays, where every monitoring system across the planet now showed the same symbol. A circular ring enclosing the solar system with Earth glowing at its center, marked with the words Core Protected Zone Active. And this label caused confusion among governments and military leaders who had no record of such classification, and as they attempted to interpret it, all communication satellites briefly synchronized with the Dominion fleet systems, revealing that both civilizations were now receiving identical control signals, and in that moment, it became clear that humanity and the Dominion were not separate observers of this event, but participants inside the same containment network. And Commander Jisoo, after long silence, ordered Hannah to continue decoding everything, even if it took days, because understanding was now the only possible path forward. And what Hannah uncovered next changed everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. Because hidden within the deepest layer of the signal was not a message of warning or defense, but a record of classification history, describing multiple civilizations across time being categorized into zones based on expansion risk, technological aggression, and unpredictability, and Earth had been placed in the highest protection category, not because it was weak, but because it was unpredictable in a way previous civilizations had never been. And that unpredictability was marked as both dangerous and essential, requiring absolute containment and protection at all costs. And this system, according to the record, had been created not by one species, but by an unknown coalition of ancient intelligence forms that had long disappeared, leaving behind only automated guardianship structures to maintain balance in regions of developing life. And Commander Jisoo listened to this with growing disbelief, because it meant they were not the first to encounter Earth, nor the first to attempt reaching it, and that countless others had likely been stopped here before without ever knowing why. And at that moment, the ring structures around the solar system began to emit a new coordinated pulse, stronger than anything before, and every Dominion ship system displayed a unified transmission that bypassed all communication channels and appeared directly on every screen, reading, "Final enforcement layer engaged," and immediately after, all fleet systems synchronized again for exactly 10 seconds, not freezing this time but reorganizing, as navigation systems were permanently locked into orbital stability, preventing any approach or retreat beyond a defined boundary. And engineer Nari confirmed that weapon systems had been reduced to passive status, not destroyed but rendered irrelevant within this controlled zone, and panic began to spread among lower crews, but Commander Jisoo remained still, understanding now that resistance was no longer an option, because there was nothing to fight against, only something to exist within. And on Earth, Jiu and Bora witnessed the same change as global systems stabilized into a strange equilibrium, where all satellites, sensors, and military networks aligned into a single shared monitoring state controlled by the same unknown system. And for the first time, humanity saw a full projection of their solar system surrounded by the massive ring structure, with every planet marked and categorized, but Earth glowing brighter than all others, labeled as Protected Core. And beneath that label appeared a final line that repeated across every system in both human and Dominion languages simultaneously. No further advancement permitted. And as this message spread across fleets and nations, Commander Jisoo finally understood the truth that no empire had prepared her for. Because Earth was not a target, not a prize, and not even a mystery to be solved, but the center of a system built to prevent repetition of ancient catastrophes, and humanity, despite its chaos and conflict, had been placed at the heart of a galactic safeguard, while the Dominion fleet, once proud and dominant, now drifted quietly in enforced orbit, unable to move forward or back, only able to observe and learn, and in the final moments of this realization, Hannah noticed one last hidden transmission embedded within the system's lowest layer, a message not directed at fleets or governments, but at future observers, reading simply, "Stability achieved." And as those words spread across silent ships and awakened planets, the vast ring structures dimmed slightly, maintaining their eternal watch, while Earth continued its ordinary life below, unaware that the entire galaxy had just been forced to stop at its boundary, not by war, not by power, but by an ancient system that had decided humanity was not ready to be lost, and not ready to be left alone either.